Chapter 123, Praying When Deeply Grieved. Matthew 26:30 and 36-46, Mark 14:26 and 32-42, Luke 22:39-46, and John 18:1. Chapter Overview. Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. His sweat is as drops of blood. Jesus finishes praying with his faithful apostles. Then, after singing praises, they go out to the Mount of Olives. They head eastward to a garden called Gethsemane, where Jesus is accustomed to going. Once they arrive at this pleasant spot among the olive trees, Jesus leaves 8 of the apostles behind. Perhaps they remain near the garden's entrance, for he tells them, "Sit down here while I go over there and pray." Taking along 3 apostles, Peter, James, and John, Jesus goes farther into the garden. He becomes greatly troubled and tells the 3, "I am deeply grieved, even to death. Stay here and keep on the watch with me." Matthew 26:36-38. Going some distance away from them, Jesus falls to the ground and begins praying. What is he praying to God about at this intense moment? He prays, "Father, all things are possible for you. Remove this cup from me. Yet not what I want, but what you want." Mark 14:35 and 36. What does he mean? Is he backing away from his role as ransomer? No. Jesus has observed from heaven the extreme suffering of others put to death by the Romans. Now, as a human who has tender feelings and who can feel pain, Jesus is not looking forward to what awaits him. More important, though, he is in agony because he senses that his dying like a despicable criminal might bring reproach on his Father's name. In a few hours, he will be hanged on a stake as if he were a blasphemer against God. After praying at length, Jesus returns and finds the 3 apostles sleeping. He says to Peter, "Could you not so much as keep on the watch for 1 hour with me? Keep on the watch and pray continually, so that you may not enter into temptation." Jesus realizes that the apostles too have been under stress, and it is late. He adds, "The spirit, of course, is eager, but the flesh is weak." Matthew 26:40 and 41. Then Jesus goes off a second time and asks that God remove from him this cup. On returning, he once again finds the 3 apostles asleep, when they should have been praying that they not enter into temptation. When Jesus speaks to them, they do not know what to answer him. Mark 14:40. A third time Jesus goes off, and he bends down on his knees to pray. Jesus is deeply concerned about the reproach that his death as a criminal will bring on his Father's name. Jehovah is hearing his son's prayers, though, and at one point God sends an angel to strengthen him. Even so, Jesus does not stop supplicating his Father, but he keeps praying more earnestly. The emotional stress is enormous. What a weight is on Jesus' shoulders. His own eternal life and that of believing humans is at stake. In fact, his sweat becomes as drops of blood falling to the ground. When Jesus returns the 3rd time to his apostles, he again finds them sleeping. "At such a time as this," he says, "you are sleeping and resting. Look, the hour has drawn near for the Son of Man to be betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up, let us go. Look, my betrayer has drawn near." Matthew 45 and 46. The following is supplementary information. His sweat is as drops of blood. Physician Luke does not explain how Jesus' sweat became as drops of blood. Luke 22:44. Luke may have been speaking illustratively, that the sweat resembled blood dripping from a wound. An alternate idea was offered by Dr. William D. Edwards in the Journal of the American Medical Association, JAMA. Although this is a very rare phenomenon, bloody sweat, hematidrosis, may occur in highly emotional states. As a result of hemorrhage into the sweat glands, the skin becomes fragile and tender. Returning to the chapter, questions for review. After leaving the upper room, where does Jesus lead the apostles? What are three apostles doing while Jesus prays? That Jesus' sweat becomes as drops of blood indicates what about his feelings? Chapter 124. Christ is betrayed and arrested. Matthew 26:47-56, Mark 14:43-52, Luke 22:47-53, and John 18:2-12. Chapter overview. Judas betrays Jesus in the garden. Peter cuts off a man's ear. Jesus is arrested. It is well past midnight. The priests have agreed to pay Judas 30 pieces of silver to betray Jesus. So Judas leads a large crowd of chief priests and Pharisees seeking to find Jesus. They are accompanied by a detachment of armed Roman soldiers with a military commander. Evidently, when Jesus dismissed him from the Passover meal, Judas went directly to the chief priests. They assembled their own officers as well as a band of soldiers. Judas may have led them first to the room where Jesus and his apostles had celebrated the Passover. But now the mob has crossed the Kidron Valley and is headed for the garden. In addition to weapons, they are carrying lamps and torches, determined to find Jesus. As Judas leads the procession up the Mount of Olives, he feels sure that he knows where to find Jesus. During the past week, as Jesus and the apostles traveled back and forth between Bethany and Jerusalem, they often stopped in the Garden of Gethsemane. But now it is night, and Jesus may be in the shadows of the olive trees in the garden. So how will the soldiers, who may not have seen Jesus before, be able to identify him? To help them, Judas will provide a sign. He says, "Whoever it is I kiss, he is the one. Take him into custody and lead him away under guard." Mark 14:44. Leading the crowd into the garden, Judas sees Jesus with his apostles and goes straight up to him. "Greetings, Rabbi," Judas says, and he kisses Jesus very tenderly. "Fellow, for what purpose are you present?" Jesus responds. Matthew 26:49 and 50. Answering his own question, Jesus says, "Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss?" Luke 22:48. But that is enough of his betrayer. Jesus now steps into the light of the torches and lamps and asks, "Whom are you looking for?" From the mob comes the answer, "Jesus, the Nazarene." Jesus courageously says, "I am he." John 18:4 and 5. Not knowing what to expect, the men fall to the ground. Rather than seizing that moment to flee into the night, Jesus again asks whom they are seeking. When they again say, "Jesus the Nazarene," he calmly continues, "I told you that I am he. So if you are looking for me, let these men go." Even at this crucial moment, Jesus recalls what he said earlier, that he would not lose a single one. Jesus has kept his faithful apostles, and not one has been lost, except the son of destruction, Judas. John 17:12 and 18:7-9. Thus he now asks that his loyal followers be let go. As the soldiers stand and move toward Jesus, the apostles realize what is happening. "Lord, should we strike with the sword?" they ask. Luke 22:49. Before Jesus can reply, Peter wields one of the two swords that the apostles have at hand. He attacks Malchus, a slave of the high priest, cutting off his right ear. Jesus touches the ear of Malchus, healing the wound. He then teaches an important lesson, commanding Peter, "Return your sword to its place, for all those who take up the sword will perish by the sword." Jesus is willing to be arrested, for he explains, "How would the scriptures be fulfilled that say it must take place this way?" Matthew 26:52 and 54. He adds, "Should I not drink the cup that the Father has given me?" John 18:11. Jesus agrees with God's will for him, even to the point of dying. Jesus asks the crowd, "Did you come out to arrest me with swords and clubs as against a robber? Day after day I used to sit in the temple teaching, and yet you did not take me into custody. But all of this has taken place for the writings of the prophets to be fulfilled." Matthew 26:55 and 56. The soldier band, the military commander, and the officers of the Jews seize Jesus and bind him. Seeing this, the apostles flee. However, a certain young man, perhaps the disciple Mark, remains among the crowd so as to follow Jesus. Mark 14:51. This young man is recognized, and the crowd attempts to seize him, which forces him to leave behind his linen garment as he gets away. Questions for review. Why does Judas look for Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane? Trying to defend Jesus, what does Peter do? But what does Jesus say about this? How does Jesus reveal that he is in agreement with God's will for him? When the apostles abandon Jesus, who remains, and what happens then? Chapter 125. Jesus is taken to Annas, then to Caiaphas. Matthew 26:57-68, Mark 14:53-65, Luke 22:54 and 63-65, and John 18:13, 14, and 19-24. Chapter overview. Jesus is taken to former high priest Annas. An illegal trial by the Sanhedrin. Once Jesus is bound like a common criminal, he is led to Annas, who was the high priest when young Jesus amazed the teachers at the temple. Some of Annas' sons later served as high priest, and now his son-in-law Caiaphas holds that position. While Jesus is at the home of Annas, Caiaphas has time to assemble the Sanhedrin. That court of 71 members includes the high priest and others who had held that office. Annas questions Jesus about his disciples and about his teaching. Jesus replies simply, I have spoken to the world publicly. I always taught in a synagogue and in the temple where all the Jews come together, and I said nothing in secret. Why do you question me? Question those who have heard what I told them. John 18:19-21. An officer standing there slaps Jesus in the face and says reprovingly, "Is that the way you answer the chief priest?" But Jesus, knowing that he has done no wrong, responds, "If I said something wrong, bear witness about the wrong. But if what I said was right, why do you hit me?" John 18:22-23. Annas then has Jesus taken away to his son-in-law, Caiaphas. By now, those composing the whole Sanhedrin, the current high priest, the elders of the people, and the scribes have assembled. They meet at the home of Caiaphas. It is illegal to hold such a trial on the night of Passover, but this does not deter them from pursuing their wicked purpose. This is hardly an unbiased group. After Jesus resurrected Lazarus, the Sanhedrin decided that Jesus should die. And just days ago, the religious authorities conspired to seize Jesus and kill him. Yes, even before his trial begins, Jesus is as good as condemned to death. In addition to meeting illegally, the chief priests and others of the Sanhedrin are attempting to find witnesses who will give false evidence to build the case against Jesus. They find many, but these cannot agree as to their testimony. Finally, two come forward and claim, "We heard him say, 'I will throw down this temple that was made with hands, and in 3 days I will build another not made with hands.'" Mark 14:58. Yet even these men do not fully agree. Caiaphas asks Jesus, "Do you say nothing in reply? What is it these men are testifying against you?" Mark 14:60. Jesus remains silent in the face of this false charge made by witnesses whose stories disagree. So High Priest Caiaphas switches to a different tactic. Caiaphas knows that the Jews are sensitive about anyone claiming to be the Son of God. Earlier, when Jesus had called God his Father, the Jews wanted to kill him because they claimed that he was making himself equal to God. John 5:17-18. Aware of such sentiments, Caiaphas now craftily demands of Jesus, "I put you under oath by the living God to tell us whether you are the Christ, the Son of God." Matthew 26:63. Of course, Jesus has acknowledged being the Son of God. If he does not do so...
Hey guys, it's Brent. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe and like this video.